in the deep, cold waters of Bushman's Hole, a place both alluring and deadly. The legacy of one diver would end in heartbreak, and another's bravery would tragically be overshadowed by fate. The story begins with the cold depths of South Africa's Bushman's Hole, a freshwater cave that had claimed more than its share of lives and would claim yet another. The year was 2005. Dave Shaw, a seasoned cave diver from Australia, had heard the haunting story of Dion Dreyer, who had perished 10 years earlier in the cave's dark abyss. Dion had been exploring the depths of Bushman's Hole in 1994, but tragically, he had vanished, never to be seen again by his family. His body, lost deep in the cave, had remained unrecovered. For his parents, the loss was a constant weight of grief and uncertainty. They had never been able to lay him to rest properly. There was no closure. Over the years, the Dreyer family had been left with only questions and the cruel silence of not knowing what had happened to their son. His body remained deep beneath the surface, where no one had dared venture. But for Dave Shaw, the disappearance was something that he could not ignore. He knew the dangers of cave diving well, but the challenge of bringing Dion's remains back to his family consumed him. The idea of retrieving the body seemed like an impossible task, yet something inside him pushed him to take it on. Shaw wasn't just any diver. He was a man of extraordinary skill, a veteran of the treacherous world of cave diving. He had explored some of the most perilous caves in the world, but Bushman's Hole was infamous for its depths, narrow passages, and unpredictable dangers. Still, Shaw was determined. He couldn't stand the thought of Dion's family never knowing where he was. He would bring Dion home. In January 2005, Shaw and his team of divers prepared for what would become a fateful mission. Shaw had spent months preparing for the dive, meticulously planning every detail of the journey, knowing the risks. He was determined that Dion's body would be returned to his family for proper closure, despite the overwhelming danger. On the day of the dive, Shaw descended into the cave. It was a harrowing journey. As he moved further down into the watery abyss, the darkness seemed to envelope him. The cold, oppressive weight of the water grew heavier with each meter, but Shaw's resolve only grew stronger. He had come for a single purpose: to retrieve Dion Dreyer's body. Shaw descended deeper into Bushman's Hole, passing the 800-foot mark, where the cave floor sloped down to its final depths. As he approached the bottom of the cave, the light from his headlamp flickered across the eerie, still waters. And then, something caught his eye. A form, a shadow, an unmistakable sight. There, lying on his back, with arms stretched out toward the surface, was Dion Dreyer's body. The moment was surreal. Shaw immediately recognized the body. He had seen the photographs, heard the stories. The body had been lying in the darkness for more than a decade. It was a sobering sight, and the weight of the task ahead began to settle in. Dion's body had become a symbol of tragedy, of a life lost too soon in the unforgiving cold of Bushman's Hole. But retrieving the body was not going to be simple. Shaw attempted to attach a line to Dion's body to secure it, but something went wrong. The body was heavier than expected, and Shaw's oxygen tanks got caught on something, preventing him from bringing it to the surface. With every movement, Shaw's breath became more labored. His rebreather, a life-saving piece of equipment, couldn't filter enough oxygen to keep up with the frantic pace of his breath. His heart raced as panic began to settle in. He had spent far too long in this depth, trying to secure the body, and now he was struggling to make the return trip. As his panic grew, Shaw's body was exhausted, and he was now fighting against his own diminishing oxygen supply. He had been down in the cave for over 15 minutes. Each passing second seemed to weigh heavier on him. He knew he had to ascend. He had no choice. Shaw's desperate swim toward the surface was fraught with danger. As he moved upward, the struggle to stay calm became all-consuming. He knew that time was slipping away. In his mind, he could already hear the echoes of Dion's family waiting above, waiting for the resolution they had been deprived of for so many years. but Shaw was now losing his grip on his own reality. The oxygen deprivation had taken its toll. His breaths became erratic and labored, and with each breath, the carbon dioxide began to build in his lungs. Shaw's struggle escalated as his line became tangled on Dion's body. His ascent became even more difficult. The body he had worked so tirelessly to bring to the surface had now become the very thing dragging him down. Panic took hold as he realized that the line was not loosening, that he could not free himself. His breath became more rapid, and his vision blurred. Every stroke he took seemed weaker than the last. Finally, the inevitable happened. Shaw lost consciousness in the cold, dark waters of Bushman's Hole, with Dion Dryer's body still tethered to him. Shaw had done all he could, but in his final moments, he too had become a victim of the very abyss he had tried to conquer. Shaw's team, waiting at various stages of the dive, grew concerned. When they reached their next decompression stop and noticed Shaw had not yet appeared, they quickly understood something was wrong. The message "Dave's not coming back" was passed up to the surface, sending a shockwave of despair through the team and to Dion Dryer's family, who had waited in hope for so long. The rescue operation turned into a grim recovery mission. When the team finally reeled the line back up, they found both Shaw and Dion's body attached to it. The bodies floated together to the surface, a tragic final sight. The subsequent investigation of Shaw's helmet-mounted camera revealed a grim truth. Shaw had likely fallen victim to nitrogen narcosis, a condition that affects deep divers by impairing their cognitive abilities and causing confusion and disorientation. This had likely been the cause of Shaw's disorientation and his inability to free himself from the line that would have brought him and Dion back to the surface. Though the recovery of both bodies brought some form of closure for Dion Dryer's family, the cost was unbearable. Dave Shaw, the man who had heroically tried to give a grieving family what they so desperately needed, had tragically lost his own life in the process. His bravery was undeniable, but his death serves as a painful reminder of the hazards of cave diving, no matter how skilled or determined one may be. The legacy of Dave Shaw's final dive lives on, not just in the successful retrieval of Dion Dryer's body, but in the hearts of all those who heard his story of selflessness. Shaw was not only a man who had faced the abyss and returned with a body, but a man who had given everything to bring closure to a family that had been living in limbo for years. His bravery will forever be etched in the tragic history of Bushman's Hole.